meeting to order. We are recording. We have a quorum. So with that, we have a number of guests. Rebecca, I don't know what's the best approach. Are we just going to jump into I know you said you were going to share a screen.
Yep, I've shared the stream, but if we could just review the minutes from June 4th, that would be helpful.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes, everybody had a chance to read the minutes. If so, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, minutes pass.
Wonderful. Well, this morning we have a presentation on Milwaukee County's strategic plan for equity. And the presentation is going to be provided by Isaac Rowlett, who's the Director of Strategic Planning, and Jeff Roman, the Director of Office of African American Affairs. And so I just wanted to take an opportunity to share a couple of comments about both of them. Because the work that they're doing right now in Milwaukee County has just been critical and some that we've really embraced here in Shorewood, and they've just been very refreshing counterparts to be able to work with. So with that, Isaac Rowlett, as I said, was the strategic planning director for Milwaukee County. Over the past 2 years, Isaac has facilitated the development of Milwaukee County's first strategic plan in 20 years. Previously, Isaac provided strategic planning, project and organizational development consulting services for federal, state, and local government agencies across 38 states. Isaac earned a master's in public administration from George Washington University and a bachelor's in genocide studies from New York University. We also have with us Jeff Roman, who assumed the role of executive director of the Milwaukee County Office on African American Affairs on July 13th, 2020. Roman's appointment enables the county to play a larger part in advancing health and racial equity throughout the region. Roman is a Milwaukee native who has extensive experience mobilizing and supporting equity-based and community-centered programs, policy advocacy, and collective impact initiatives. He has a long track record of working with grassroots, philanthropy, nonprofits, and the public sector, as well as diverse groups of Milwaukee County residents. Roman was also a two-term commissioner and past chair of the Milwaukee Equal Rights Commission. And I just want to give just a really warm welcome to the both of them. Again, I can't stress the importance of the ability for us in Shorewood to have an ability to work with the both of them and be embraced within the scope of their work. And so I'm really proud to have them join us this morning. So welcome, and I have given you both capability as host. So when you're ready to share your screen for purposes of the presentation, you're welcome to do so.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. This is Isaac Rowlett. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Rebecca, and thank you all so much for taking the time and inviting us to participate in today's meeting. Very much appreciate it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to provide a brief overview for about 10-15 minutes of the overview of Milwaukee County's strategic plan and its origins. And then I'm going to hand things over to Director Roman to share more information about our diverse and inclusive communities strategic objective, of which in full disclosure, you all have exemplified already, and we cite you all as an example in terms of Shorewood's historic decision to extend its tax incremental financing district in order to fund affordable housing. So kudos to you all and to the broader Shorewood community. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here.
Should be located in the middle bottom of the screen.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, can you all see this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Good? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Sounds good. And please feel free to weigh in with any questions, comments as we go, either in the chat or verbally. Either way is totally fine. Really appreciate open and honest discussion. Okay, so a little bit of background. So in 2019, as you may be familiar, Milwaukee County became the first jurisdiction in the United States to recognize racism as a public health crisis. And actually, every time I present these, I need to update it more. I think we're at something more like 190 local governments have followed suit. I can't recall whether Shorewood has followed suit. I know Cudahy and a number of other municipalities have declared racism a public health crisis. I don't recall whether Shorewood is one of those jurisdictions. But the city of Milwaukee has, and many other jurisdictions across the state. And the reason why we cite this is because this moment was pivotal. It was precisely at this moment in 2019 that the county was developing its first strategic plan in 20 years. So county leaders at that time aligned around a mission statement, a fairly banal mission statement of we enhance the quality of life in Milwaukee County through great public service. And at the time, I think everyone thought, okay, we, enhance quality of life through great public service. Sounds nice enough. Sounds like a solid mission statement. But what we started to do was investigate the quality of life in Milwaukee County. And, some of you may be already familiar with some of the statistics I'm going to be sharing, be it through lived experience or professional experience. But just to be very candid and open for someone like me who grew up in Fox Point and have led a pretty privileged life, a lot of these statistics were new to me. And they were new to, I think, a lot of folks who work at Milwaukee County. So when we began investigating the health of Milwaukee County, things like quality of life, life expectancy, and health disparities, we found out that the state of Milwaukee County's health is quite low. So we are in the bottom quartile of counties in Wisconsin. Depending on which set of data you look at, we're about 70th out of 72 counties or around there in terms of our ranking. And Milwaukee County experiences vastly higher rates of chronic disease than our surrounding WOW counties. So clearly this is no accident of geography or other forces beyond human control. And in particular, the reason for this is essentially because of our racial disparities. It really comes on almost every indicator that you look at, as you may know, this comes down to race. And one of the more troubling statistics that we stumbled upon in 2019 was that a white person in Milwaukee County will on average live 14 years longer than a Black person. And in particular, our most vulnerable communities, the youngest among us, are infants. The infant mortality rate or deaths per 1,000 births is 4.9 deaths for white people compared to 13.1 deaths for Black people. So I think collectively among county leaders and other stakeholders who are involved in this process, we recognize that this is unacceptable. And in order to, as I said, advance this mission of enhancing quality of life through great public service, we needed to really wrap our heads around the role that we play in advancing health and resolving racial disparities in Milwaukee County. So we started on a journey that we're still very much on within Milwaukee County government. And that's a journey of understanding the history of government and race. And we're very fortunate here in Milwaukee, in addition to having internal experts at Milwaukee County, such as Director Roman, who's with us today. We also have a wide variety of experts among folks like Reggie Jackson and Dr. Monique Liston, and a lot of other local experts who have national profiles as well, with whom we consulted in order to provide workshops for Milwaukee County employees in order to learn more about the history of how we got here today. Because as we all know, it's not an accident that these disparities are what they are. They're in fact a result of many, centuries, but then especially locally, many decades of systemic and often intentional decisions on the part of policymakers, businesses, and communities. So this is a very crude attempt to summarize in three pictures how we got to where we are today. We made sure that I think about 97% of our employees have participated in racial equity workshops, and they typically, among other things, have covered the history of how racism in our region was historically explicit in order to maintain racial equity. I'm sure you've probably seen the redlining maps from the early 20th century. You probably won't be surprised to know that regardless of which indicator you look at, whether it's food security, housing accessibility, home ownership, COVID rates, and COVID vaccination rates, you're likely going to see the very same areas that were deemed by our predecessors in government as hazardous continue to experience the greatest disparities today. So these were really baked into the system by government, and thus it's on us as government today to resolve and rectify these disparities. Now, if you grew up like me, you might have learned that racism became extinct after Martin Luther King, and that we are all equal and we shouldn't talk about race, and that's rude and uncomfortable. And what we've learned, and I'll be honest, as a white person, it's been a real journey for me, is that it's doing things like that precisely exacerbates and continues and perpetuates inequity. So if we fail to acknowledge that people who look like me, particularly white men, face significantly fewer obstacles than women and people of color in their journeys through life, then all we're doing is pretending that these inequities don't exist. And we're really reinforcing and reifying a lot of these disparities. So what's the alternative? The alternative is being proactively for racial equity. And by virtue of being proactively for racial equity, the policies that we enact will benefit everyone. Think of one of my favorite analogies for this is from Angela Glover Blackwell, who calls this the curb cut effect. Sidewalks, some of you may remember, didn't always have a cut in the corner in order to allow people to use a stroller or wheelchair in order to get from the street to the sidewalk easily. And although that was initially put in for reasons of accessibility, much like those buttons that we push, especially in COVID times, with our elbow to get into a door automatically, these are things that benefit us all and make improve life for all people. So we very much, this has been a journey for all of us, but we very much have spent a lot of time considering the differences between equality and equity, and recognizing the pitfalls of focusing on equality as opposed to meeting the needs of each of our residents. So let's bring it home to where we are and where we're going. So recognizing the role that racial inequity plays in limiting our ability to advance our mission, we set a vision that by achieving racial equity, Milwaukee is the healthiest county in Wisconsin. And to those of you who, like me, especially if you have a background in nuts and bolts in the business world in strategic planning, you're probably like, that both sounds hopelessly ambitious and impossible. And I would challenge you that it's actually not. So the zip code in which I believe many of you reside, 53211, 53212 isn't all that different. It has a life expectancy higher than any county within the state of Wisconsin. That is to say that if areas like the North Shore of Milwaukee, which I feel entitled to pick on, having grown up in Fox Point, if we could serve all of our communities across Milwaukee County in the same way that we've been able to serve some, we could in fact become the healthiest county in Wisconsin. So our mission, just to recap, is that we enhance the quality of life through great public service. Our vision is that by achieving racial equity, Milwaukee is the healthiest county in Wisconsin. And values. So the values are very important in terms of driving our strategic plan. Our values are that our inclusion, we actively seek diverse perspectives when making decisions. Influence, we collectively use our power to positively impact our community. And integrity, we do the right thing even when no one is looking. And let's get into some of the specifics before I hand things over to Director Roman to provide additional details about two of the objectives for which he's the executive sponsor. So our strategic plan is divided into 3 buckets: create intentional inclusion, bridge the gap, and invest in equity. 1A within create intentional inclusion is reflect the full diversity of county government at every level of county government. So historically, county government white men have been vastly overrepresented at all levels of Milwaukee County government. And this has been really challenging because we have not been able to access the full talent and abilities of Milwaukee County residents in stewarding our county into the future. So this is a key goal in terms of ensuring that we reflect the entirety of our community. Secondly, what goes hand in hand with that, of course, is creating and nurturing an inclusive culture. This is particularly important because of, as I'm sure many of you know, an experience in your professional settings. The labor market is such that we need that it's become a competitive advantage for organizations, including ourselves, to ensure that we have an inclusive culture that can, as I said, draw on all of the talent of our residents. 1C is increase the number of county contracts awarded to minority and women-owned businesses. Milwaukee County has hundreds of millions of dollars that we push out in contracts every year, and we want to ensure that we are building wealth in Black and Brown communities through our businesses, and that we're furthering equity, both racial, gender, and otherwise through this work. So that's the create intentional inclusion bucket. Second is bridge the gap. So I've already talked about some of the racial disparities. We all hear about them fairly often. And so this centers around how are we actually going to resolve some of those disparities? Well, 2A is determine what, where, and how we deliver services based on the resolution of health disparities. The services offered by Milwaukee County don't necessarily reflect the needs of those we serve today or those whom we will serve in the future. So this is a team for which I'm the project manager we've created an inventory of every single service that Milwaukee County offers. And what we are doing is investigating why we offer this service. Are we in the right businesses of doing what we should be doing? And how can we steer and shift our service portfolio in order to better support and advance racial and health equity? 2B is break down silos across county government to maximize access to and quality of services offered. 2C, which Director Roman will talk about more shortly, is apply a racial equity lens to all decisions. 3A is invest upstream to address root causes of health disparities. So the short analogy on this one is, rather than if we found out, for example, as we did, that asthma rates are more than double among the Black community in Milwaukee County than they are in the white community, rather than focusing on purchasing inhalers or ensuring access to inhalers for our Black population, we're instead focused on changing who's at the decision-making table when decisions are being made about the placement of factories, highways, and other heavy industry, so as to move all the way upstream to thinking about how power and wealth are allocated and how decisions are made in the communities that they impact, given the importance of particulate matter and air quality on rates of asthma. 3B is enhance the county's fiscal and health sustainability. If you've heard the county executive or anyone from the county speak, you're probably acutely aware of our financial challenges and our structural deficit. And that's something that we have to take care of, particularly through an increase in our local sales tax in order to be able to resolve our structural deficit. And last but certainly not least, 3C is dismantle barriers to diverse and inclusive communities. And this really stems from the county executive's pledge when County Executive Crowley ran to take Milwaukee off the list of the most segregated metropolitan areas in the country. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand things over to Director Roman to share more information about a couple of objectives. Objective 2C, apply a racial equity lens to all decisions, and objective 3C, dismantle barriers to diverse and inclusive communities.
All right, so Isaac, if you can just keep this slide up, I'm going to work from this slide. And then I also want to let you all know we also have Leanne Delsart here with us today, who is with the Milwaukee County, the wraparound program, is the project manager for the Dismantle Barriers for Diverse and Inclusive Communities. And I'm going to ask her to kind of tag team with me to share a little bit more about what that team is doing. And if Leanne, if you have any slides you want to share, you're welcome to do that. But I'm going to stay here because I want to talk a little bit about the Racial Equity Lens team first and the work that we've been doing. Because racial equity is at the forefront of all the work that's happening here. It is the grounding and the foundation for the work that we do. And so I am the executive sponsor for the 2C Apply Racial Equity Lens team. And our charge was to make sure that to advance the county's vision in our work, that there was a shared definition and shared language and shared understanding of concepts to apply a racial equity lens. And over the last, I would say almost nearly 6 months now, or even longer, we have been working really hard to do some learning and some grounding with the team and with the rest of the county to understand the words that we're saying. When we're talking about racial equity, what do we actually mean? What are we actually saying? What do those words mean? And what is the historical context behind those words? And how do we use those to make sure that we are applying this lens to all of our decision making across the county? And so I want to start with just providing the broad definition of what racial equity is. It is defined as the just and fair inclusion of people of color in a society where all people, regardless of their color, regardless of their gender, regardless of their orientations, all people can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. Because we live in a society, unfortunately, where that's not the case, where there are certain groups of people who have better access, fuller access to opportunities that exist, and there are other groups of people, for historical reasons, who do not. And so it's about the intentional inclusion, the just and fair inclusion of people of color in decision-making processes so that everybody can benefit from the opportunities and everybody can access the opportunities to participate in those, prosper from those, and then reach their full potential. And that grounding definition, understanding that definition, and prioritizing justice, fairness, and the inclusion of people of color in our governance and decision-making process, and understanding it as both a process and an outcome, is the application of a racial equity lens. And so that's the work that this strategy team has been doing, is understanding and learning what racial equity is, and the process, that the continual process and the continual learning and the continual discovery and self-reflection and challenging of ourselves and our institutions that we have to do to be able to get to this space that we want to get to, where everybody, regardless of their color, regardless of all of these other characteristics, where they all have and can access what I call the American dream. And that takes work and that takes time. And so this team is responsible for not only normalizing those conversations, but now moving into socializing those concepts so that we can operationalize them in our policies and practices. So that's the Racial Equity Lens team. And we'll be developing some toolkits and some toolboxes, not only for our workforce, but hopefully be able to extend those resources and that learning and that grounding to our municipal partners, including the village of Shorewood. And so I want to move over to the Dismantle Barriers to Diverse and Inclusive Communities team, and just give this caveat here that the other 8 strategic objectives are really internally focused. This last objective, Dismantle Barriers to Diverse and Inclusive Communities, not only allows us to be able to look internally at the internal systems and assets that exist within Milwaukee County government, but also those that are outside of Milwaukee County government, particularly in the municipalities and the communities that make up the full footprint of Milwaukee County. And so we are actively engaged in involving and including and inviting not only employees and leaders of Milwaukee County in these discussions, but some of you have already been involved in these discussions. We are inviting our municipal partners. We are looking to extend invitations to other sectors and other systems to engage in these processes, as we are charged with coming up with a set of recommendations to share with the county executive and the leadership of Milwaukee County and with our municipal partners about the barriers that exist in our communities, and more importantly, the assets and policies and things that we have in our communities that we can leverage to be able to address those policies and those things. And so this really excited about this particular objective, because it allows us to really demonstrate the application of racial equity, and that we're being inclusive intentionally of the partners, of our stakeholders, and eventually the stakeholders who are impacted by the barriers that exists in our city and outside of our, and throughout the rest of the county. And there are two primary drivers that this task, the strategy team has, this objective has. One is to increase the quality of life and opportunity for people of color and residents that live in the core of the city, in the core of the city of Milwaukee, in the urban area. There's work that we need to do to be able to reinvest and support and build up capacity and build up resources and infrastructure in the core of the cities, so that the core of the city has what it needs for people to thrive. And likewise, there's a body of work, there's work that needs to happen and that we want to commit to be able to address the barriers to inclusion and make the broader footprint of Milwaukee County more inclusive and to increase positive experiences, increase access to opportunities in our suburban areas. And those are the two driving questions that we're asking. How do we increase quality of life in the core of the city? And then how do we address barriers and eliminate those barriers to increase access and opportunities in our suburban communities? And there are three goals that we have developed, and that is, again, identifying barriers and putting forth a set of recommendations to move the needle. And there are a number of things that have elevated already. You've heard already one, the county executive's commitment that's really driving this is the county executive's commitment to get Milwaukee, the MSA, the Milwaukee Metro Statistical Area, off the list of being the most segregated area in the country. But there's also things around housing, and as I just said, housing accessibility and transportation, economic development, all of those things that contribute to the profile, I'll say, of our county and our various communities. And so the next goal is creating welcoming spaces inside and outside, in the city and outside of the city core in our suburban areas, and making sure that those spaces are not only welcoming, but they are providing an opportunity to access quality of life and opportunities for all residents, regardless of how they look or where they come from. And then the last one is actualizing the influence of Milwaukee County and our municipal partners to be able to influence the policies, decision-making processes, and make sure that the distribution of resources and services and programs are going to who actually needs those services, and doing that in an intentional and equitable way. And so that's the focus of this team. And again, we're really, really excited that we have partners such as those of you in Shorewood and other parts of our county who are committed to having these conversations and developing these strategies to be able to dismantle the barriers so that everybody has access to all the opportunities that are afforded throughout our county. Leanne, do you want to share anything else on that?
No, I appreciate the overview. The only thing that I might add is that we are actively in the process now as a work group of really, drilling down sort of the priorities that we would like to focus on in terms of what we want to put forth recommendations about. And we're always looking for additional members to the work group. So that's my plug.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with that, I mean, there's so much more that we can talk about, but we don't want to go with the limited time that we have. We don't want to do too big a deeper dive. And so, Isaac, I'll turn it over back to you, or do we want to open it up for questions, reactions, responses to those from the CDA who's here today?
Absolutely. I got nothing more. I just want to, throw it open as long as Rebecca, that time allows. I apologize if we went a little bit long there.
And then I'll just close and say, I do want to appreciate the village of Shorewood, the leadership of Shorewood, because you all are demonstrating how other communities can do this work. A lot of people think that these issues are only about the city of Milwaukee. And there's, this is a city of Milwaukee problem. Race equity is a city of Milwaukee problem. And we all know that that is not true. And it takes proactive, intentional leadership from all of our communities to be able to address this problem that we are all responsible for fixing. And so kudos to you all and Shorewood for playing your role and being open to working with the county to advance our mission and our vision.
Well, thank you. This is Peter Hammond, Chair of the CDA. Thank you for that presentation. I think that was really amazing information. Um, I'd certainly open it up to questions. I guess a couple questions I had. I'm curious, Isaac, in your discussion, some of those, the first column of items, obviously having more diverse staff in the county. I'm also curious, there's so many great organizations in the community that are addressing issue. People have been working on these and have great ideas. Are you incorporating outside groups into the discussion as well?
Absolutely. And Jeff, feel free to speak to this as well. I mean, we really view, when I could have done a better job of articulating this, but we are actively in partnership with not only other government institutions, but also private sector organizations, nonprofit organizations, and others who are working on these issues as well. And I think one of the organizations which I want to make sure I give a shout out to, because I didn't before, is really the Ywca, because their 16-hour unlearning racism training was really pivotal. We provided that for all of our leaders across the county beginning in 2019. And that's been particularly instructive as well. Also, nurturing diversity partners, Reggie Jackson and Fran Kaplan have provided trainings for all of our managers and people leaders on how to ensure diversity, how to maximize diversity in hiring, foster an inclusive culture, etc. So I'll pause there. Jeff, I don't know if you have additional pieces to add.
Yeah, I think one intentional place where we want to do a lot of that more external community-based engagement is through the dismantling barriers to diverse and inclusive communities. And again, the application of a racial equity lens is the intentional inclusion and the elevation of the voices and lived experience of most impacted communities. And so we intend, as we begin to roll out our broader process around identifying barriers to inclusive communities and some of the things that exist inside and outside of government, one of the strategies that we want to be able to deploy is a robust community engagement strategy to identify and engage those underground folk organizations and partners who's doing that work, because they're needed, and we can't do this without that intentional elevation of their voices and lived experiences. And so also a plug, we're actively having those conversations, and as we are engaging people to be a part of the Dismantling Barriers work group, we're asking the question, who else should be in the conversation? Who are those people? Where are they? How do we get in touch with them so that we know who they are, we can go find them?
Yeah, we actually had, Isaac, to your point on the unlearning racism, we actually, the YWCA did put on a program at the Shorewood school after an incident in Shorewood. And so we were able, we had Paula Pennybaker and Martha presented it to us, and I participated. Really pretty amazing. I agree that that is a great way, as you know, to look at things through a different and clearer lens. So I think I had some of the same epiphanies you might have had through that process. One other, and again, everybody else jump in if you have questions. I guess to me, part of the challenge is, well, first of all, the whole concept that nobody has ever extended to TID in the past in order to do affordable housing. I sort of feel like there's not a lot of ground that's been, we're sort of figuring this out on our own a little bit, which is both disappointing and exciting at the same time, I guess, and a bit challenging, because we are trying to be very transparent with the community, with everybody, that we are, a lot of things that a community organization like the CDA might do is you feel like you need to be experts in order to then move forward. And I think our approach here is that we are learning with the community. We are all learning this together, and trying to find the right path forward. We understand at a high level what we're trying to do, but of course the devil is in the details in how we are actually able to bring people on board and implement it effectively and be part of sort of the bigger solution. So I guess one of my questions is, so how far along are you in your process? Because I feel like, again, I think one of Rebecca's things is we can sort of be a part of your process. We are a part of your process. And so where can we lean on you for assistance and support? Where do we have to be doing our own things? So, you know, as you move forward and you start to me, get into the implementation and the action steps, that's where I feel we might be getting some value from you, and you can help us then kind of define the path forward of how to do this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually going to phone a friend on this one. One of my colleagues, Aaron Hertzford, who is our director of our Department of Administrative Services, also has a background as our director of economic development, and experience also in municipal government as well. I'm gonna draw on him. He has some knowledge of he has better subject matter expertise in this area than I do, and he's also a member of our diverse and inclusive communities strategy team. So Aaron, I'm gonna call on you.
Sure, Isaac. Yeah, thanks. Happy to jump in and help out, and definitely appreciate the efforts and opportunity to have this conversation with our friends and partners in Shorewood. You know, the TIF extension was absolutely a big step and really important. And there have been a couple of communities have done it. The law change that made it available is relatively new, so there's not a lot of precedent at play. And so I think it's something that we are with you on that journey, right? And won't claim to have the answers about the right thing to do. I think it's for us when we look at those options, we balance against the data points, right? And we know the issues of segregation. We know the challenges related to affordable housing. We know that those have disproportional impacts within our community. Here we have an opportunity to add to the pool of funding, perhaps not with a clear picture of how those dollars get utilized, although there's no time limit about when they have to be spent. For us, it would be a big missed opportunity if we didn't encourage communities to take advantage of those available funds, and then circle back into that conversation about what's the best use of it. I think the other thing that I'll add is that, you know, Milwaukee County is on a journey too. And as I noted, won't claim to have the answers. You know, we, even within the county, we often approach our work by educating, providing the data points, providing some of the historical context, but really challenging our department leaders and others within the county to come up with and really outline a roadmap of what achieving racial equity looks like for individual departments. And so I think that's somewhat of the challenge, is that there aren't those answers out there. I think we have built a pretty good working relationship with Shorewood on a couple of issues where we've had conversations, ask questions, brainstorm together, feel out ideas. And I think we're happy to be that partner. I think at the end of the day, Shorewood kind of has to decide about where it can have impacts. You know, I know the city of Wauwatosa is going through an extensive review of their zoning code, and starting to have some real conversations about some of the exclusionary zoning issues that exist within their community, and starting to have conversations about how to unravel that. What are the impacts that's historically had on Wauwatosa, and what could we do differently going forward? So I think there are a bunch of techniques out there. I think every community is probably going to approach it in a slightly different way. And while we would at the county consider ourselves to be champions of the cause, and the declaration around racism public health crisis, again, we're in that learning mode as well, and are going through a whole evolution within our organization as well about how do we realign pieces, how do we make sure we provide services where they're needed most. Isaac, I don't know, or Jeff, if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, so I'll just say that learning is crucial to the process, and you don't want to expedite the learning and the continual discovery and the process of engaging the voices that need to be in the conversation so that they're part of the decision-making process. You have to go through the learning and take the time to weave the learning and the continuous learning and improvement through the process. That is the equity piece of it. Doing the learning and making sure that you're intentionally engaging, however you define the diversity of those communities, however you define who's going to be impacted by these decisions, they have to be engaged in the process to help define those decisions. And that's the application of the racial equity lens. And so take your time, be intentional, be thoughtful. That is racial equity. That is the racial equity. That is the equity work that's needed to be able to do what you all are talking about doing.
Peter, it's Jessica.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question in relation to that. We have a little over $2 million, which, in theory sounds like a lot, but in application is really not that much. And we've talked about what does that actual application look like? And we talked at our last meeting, we kind of had a brainstorming session. And one of the things that we talked about was some of the stuff that Evanston, Illinois has been doing in helping individuals who are victims of redlining be able to purchase homes, which would, if we did something like that, would be a much smaller impact versus, subsidizing more units. And so, I think my question is, what is more important? And I don't know that this is even an answer that you guys can give us, because I think we may, as a CDA, have to figure this out. But what is more important, making a greater impact on fewer individuals or impacting more people at a smaller impact? If that makes sense as a question.
No.
The question certainly makes sense to me. I don't think I have an answer to do justice to such a profound question, though. Yeah. Jeff, I don't know if you have thoughts.
This is Joel.
Go ahead.
Joel Sage, if I can jump in. I started on an analysis of this, and this is premature to be putting it forward, but I did come up with, if Shorewood's housing stock is at 5.6% affordable, in order to get to 6%, which is not that meaningful, we would need 20 more units. And to get to like 7%, we would need like 100% affordable housing units. And that 2 million doesn't stretch that far. So we need to make a meaningful change, we can either look at raw numbers, like we can do 20 units, or we need partners to scale that our 2.2 and leverage it up. And I think as long as we have Milwaukee County on the line with us here, that we should see where we can work together as part of leveraging that to make a more profound and bigger impact. But to your point, it's very hard to get numbers beyond about 10 to 20 units with the money we have without getting creative. And then we're still in that learning part. We have demonstrated the funds and the intentions and the will. And now this is where the learning comes in. So just to speak to that point a little bit, that's kind of what I've come up with just on napkins looking at it right now.
I'll just note, it's the issues of race and segregation are profound and they're not going to change overnight. And so I think, whatever progress you're deciding to make is progress, and that is a good thing, right? Taking steps out on that journey, and it will take years, decades, perhaps longer than our lifetimes to make real progress on some of these issues. But Joe, I think you brought up the point that, you can leverage those dollars, not necessarily just in isolation, but with other projects, or utilize it to incentivize specific actions to make progress towards the goals, however you decide to define them. Promote it to the development community with expectations attached to it. Layer with LIDAC credits or other sorts of available resources. I think would all be good things. there's ARPA dollars coming in. I know we're targeting a bunch of our dollars are likely going to get targeted towards housing. I'm not sure how Shorewood's having that conversation, but thinking about what other resources exist within your community. The other thing I'll note is that in some of the communities that have done this before, they have targeted those dollars at increasing the quality of housing stock of those that are in affordable territory, right? So thinking about making sure that even if you have units within your community that are affordable, if they're not meeting quality standards or creating quality homes, can you utilize those dollars to help add value or enhance the quality of life for those who are living in affordable units? So, and the other thing I'll say is that, that's sort of a first step with that $2 million. I don't know what the TID cycle is for other open districts within the community, but you could certainly add to that pool over time. Lots of different options, and I think communities are going to handle that differently. But it's certainly something we're willing to brainstorm around with you.
Peter, I have a question.
Yeah,
And
Kathy.
this might be fairly intrinsic, and maybe it's obvious to everyone but me. So because integration is such a goal here, how do we make affordable housing available with a goal toward improving integration without violating federal non-discrimination laws?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. What was the question?
How do we improve integration? How do we provide affordable housing? Let's say it's for 5 houses. How do we do it with the goal of integration without violating federal non-discrimination law?
That's
So Jeff, go ahead if you've got a
No, I was
good
gonna say, I don't, that's a good question that we might have to have some conversation and brainstorm with our legal department and your legal departments to kind of maneuver through that. But I don't have off top of my head. I'm trying to pull back my ERC brain, but I can't bring it up.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say, you could ask that same question about anything, right? I mean, we talk about the need to diversify workforce within Milwaukee County. We want to be representative of the individuals that we serve within the county. The way we approach that is by hiring the best quality candidates. We also make sure that we are intentional about how we review resumes, how we approach our job descriptions in the first place, and are there ways that we are signaling unintentionally to certain communities historically, and how we've recruited applicants, how we put together hiring panels, right? Who's reviewing people? Do people feel welcome in that room when they come in to interview for a project? And so, I think there's a number of ways to approach that conversation about how are you as a community welcoming people in there, and do certain people feel welcome in coming in there? It's not necessarily about specifically, targeting units at a specific population. But Corey, I saw you jump on, and I wonder if you've got a better answer than that.
Well, I have an answer. I don't know if it's a better answer. I think your question is really good, Kathy. Lois Quinn and I have also been discussing this. And because oftentimes fair housing laws and fair housing goals don't always mesh, sometimes they conflict. And so this goal of creating more integrated community, there are chances it can run afoul with the fair housing laws. So that is a place that we're happy to kind of be present during those discussions to make sure we can thread that needle in the right way without running afoul of any fair housing laws. So just to let you know, we'll be in that conversation with you whenever you're ready to have it.
Corey, would you mind introducing yourself to the group, just for those who don't know you?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm Corey Schneider-Perugini. I work for the Metro Milwaukee Fair Housing Council. And yeah, I've been following this process since, I guess, February. So I'm happy to see where we are in this conversation currently. Thanks for inviting me, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. You're always welcome. keep coming. We appreciate you being here. Peter, I know that President McKay also has her hand raised.
Oh, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. To Jessica's question, if Rebecca is able to schedule the Milwaukee Community Development Alliance presentation, I think it will help kind of look at different ways of increasing access and inventory for affordable housing and then that'll help us think about Metro-wide. I really enjoyed their presentation, and maybe you already heard it, but their work teams were divided into 4 quadrants, and one was increasing home ownership and preserving home ownership. And one was increasing number of rental units and preserving number of rental units. So really looking at gentrification as well as increasing access. And I was really excited about that. So I think that that'll be a really nice like layering of learning. And then we'll go into the fall program that Rachel Collins is working with Reggie Jackson around, like sort of affordable housing 101. What are the tools? What are the history? And why does everybody get so upset about it? So.
Thank you so much, President McKay, for mentioning that. Our next meeting, for those of you who are on the call, we welcome you to continue joining and showing up in these spaces as we continue to learn. Our next meeting as a CDA is scheduled for Tuesday, August 10th at 9 a.m., which will also be done via Zoom. And that is a presentation from the Community Development Alliance, which is the group that President McKay just recently mentioned. The presenters on that will be the executive director, which is Ywca Smith, and then Gina Smith, who is the executive director of the Zilber Family Foundation, but she's also the chair of the Community Development Alliance. So they're going to be joining us to share about their work in this area, which I think will be a next really positive next step to continuing with some of the questions that are being posed on the call this morning.
Yeah, this is Peter again. I'm interested in maybe Jeff's thoughts on. I feel like so Milwaukee County is taking a very intentional approach, which is great. Sort of from the let's all get on the same page, understand the initiatives, and then move to implementation. And Shorewood sort of, I feel like, jumped the gun, if you will, and went straight to implementation in terms of extending the TID and saying yes, affordable housing. And so we've now, which there's been, as we've all said, lots of talk about things, but not a lot of action. And we're all trying to find, get to the action to get to solutions. And so I feel like we're coming at this from 2 different directions. We've now got our sort of the solution, if you will, but we don't have all the training and all the coming together on the conceptual, so that we have the community with us when whatever it's going to be, whatever that money, the 2 million is going to be used for. I feel like we still need to get people on board. I think Shorewood as a community, of course, is at a conceptual level wanting to be on the right side of this. I think everything you presented, you would get nods of yes from every citizen in Shorewood on that. But to me, the challenge comes from that concept to the actual what it looks like in the community. And so I feel like if we can, I don't know, I want to partner with you as you're going through your process, because you've thought it through so well. And that's where I'm struggling, is the training, the getting all of us up to speed, ready to go, so that our implementation is exactly what we wanted it to be. I'm struggling. That's where I'm struggling right now. That we're already at implementation, but we haven't done a lot of the work to get ourselves all on the same page as to what that looks like. Again, if that makes sense either to Jeff or Isaac or anybody on your side.
Well, I think it makes perfect sense, because we did the same thing. we jumped right into it, and we've had to slow ourselves down just a little bit to be able to make sure that we have the proper grounding for the work that we've decided that we wanted to do. And so you're no different than any other community that's kind of facing this challenge. And I think the opportunity is to welcome and slow yourselves down, to take the time to include those voices that need to be included, to take the time to do the discovery and the learning that you need to do, and do it as part of the collective process, so that it's happening together. It's bringing community together so that they're engaged in the process, and we're learning together about the disparities. We're learning together about the history. We're learning together about what the potential looks like, and we're working together to define together and contextualize together what all that means in a process together. It doesn't have to be two exclusive, two different processes, two parallel processes. It can happen together. And so we did the same thing. We jumped right in. We want to do this. We want to do this, do this. And I came in just under a year ago. I said, we're going too fast, y'all. Great stuff. Great stuff. We're going too fast because we don't have the grounding that we need. We don't have the language. We don't have the concepts. It's there. We've started the work. We're starting to normalize the conversation, but now we got to go to 2.0, which means we have to start to embed and socialize those conversations, which means we need to continue and make learning and continuous improvement and continuous engagement a part of the process. It is that the process is what we want. Equity is about the process and the outcome. The outcome comes from the process, and you have to take the time to do that. And so always the opportunity is you can slow yourselves down and say, hey, we want to engage community, but we also want to learn and embed learning as part of this process.
Peter, I also wanted to share with you that there's a gentleman by the name of Robert Moses who has his hand raised.
Okay. Go ahead, Robert.
Hi, this is David Amenta. I'm sorry, my husband put a different name on the Zoom thing. I just wanted to ask about, this is an idea. I'm good, how are you? I'm so glad that this conversation is happening. It's really positive, and I appreciate everyone from the county and Corey and your perspectives on this I think are really gonna help Shorewood move forward on this. My question was that this is actually an idea brought forward by our former village manager, Chris Schwartz, about TID districts that extend over municipal boundaries. So for example, we could have a TID district that would include like the west side of Shorewood, over the bridge, and some area of that part of Milwaukee that is adjacent to Shorewood. So that, to the extent that there's tax increment generated in Shorewood, it could be used in a broader area to help development, either housing or economic development in that neighborhood of Milwaukee. And I'm sorry, is that River West? It's kind of north of River West. I'm not sure if it's a separate neighborhood, but I don't know if you guys at the county, if anyone has done that, or if that's something that would be useful.
I'm not sure if we.
Yeah, this is Isaac. I'm not familiar with that, but I appreciate the innovative thinking in terms of alternative models. One example that I just want to flag, because I think it's interesting when you think about, as President McKay, said candidly, why everyone gets so upset about affordable housing. One really outstanding example of affordable housing in our region is actually in New Berlin. And they have a really interesting story of how the community went from literally saying, we don't want the north side of Milwaukee here in New Berlin. And people said stuff like, I left the city of Milwaukee to come here. Now, I don't want to have to live next to those people. And they've come a really long way and went through a really long journey. So forgive me, I know that doesn't address your question specifically, but it's just to say that even that there are, although this work is new in some ways, there's communities that may be less ripe for this type of work that have found innovative ways to expand affordable housing within their municipalities.
Peter, I'm noticing that Trustee Stokebrand also has her hand raised.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess
Go ahead, Kathy.
for me, I think it's good for me to hear the people in this group visiting our meeting, to hear that we need to slow down, because it sort of takes a little bit of a weight off of my shoulders, because I feel like, wow, we need to, there was a strong outpouring, we need to get this done, but the worst thing we can do is probably go too fast.
Yeah,
and so,
exactly.
I really think if you think a year from February, like this coming February, maybe we have narrowed it down to 2 or 3 possibilities, and maybe, I just think we're thinking maybe implement 2023, nothing wrong with that, because across the whole country, affordable housing is, I think it's coming along, and because of the situation that we have economically. And so I think, to go too fast would be a mistake. And if we can partner with the county in some ways, that's great. But there's nothing wrong with slowing it down, looking 2 years down the road for implementation. I guess from the county, then I'm looking, if you can give specific examples of things that are being done at the county level, that you see that we could partner with you in terms of programs, because we're small, we don't really have, the staff to do. Are there specific things that you can cite that you see openings that we could leverage, partner with you? Like, or decisions you've made in the last 6 months that you can, show how equity in the county is moving forward?
Sure. So I can speak to some examples, and then as Director Roman referenced and Leanne, we are always open to partnering, particularly around the diverse and inclusive communities objective. So, but pointing to some specific examples, probably one of the most important has been the use of a racial equity budget tool that we have all of our departments fill out in order to address questions along the lines of who benefits and who's burdened by decisions that are made, oftentimes seemingly innocuous decisions that may not have an impact on equity.
So question, for example, that would be the elimination of the Summerfest buses, right?
And
the
yes, as opposed to, that's correct, as opposed to reducing lines for people to get to their jobs.
Right. Okay.
Yep. So, and yeah, ideally, a lot of these decisions would just be about making increased investments. And we have made increased investments. For example, folks may be familiar with our vaccination program for homebound individuals to ensure that everyone is able to get vaccinated who wants to get vaccinated, regardless of whether they can get to a location. But for financial reasons, it's often hard for us to make continued additional investments. So sometimes there are difficult decisions that need to be made in terms of financial reductions. And that's a particularly important area for us to apply that racial equity lens, as Director Roman said. I also want to add that we talk a lot about racial equity, but that's because what we've learned from the Government Alliance on Racial Equity is, although we are racially explicit, we're not racially exclusive. So for example, we just redid it's small things sometimes. We did all of our email signatures across the county to include people's pronouns. If anyone has anyone in their life who may not identify, who may use they or them pronouns or additional pronouns, how much that's important to someone's dignity and self-worth. And also, as I said, from a strictly pragmatic perspective, it's also a matter of ensuring that we're able to draw on all the talent the county has to offer. Similarly, our partnerships in terms of accessibility at Brady Beach, we have now the most accessible beach. We may not be open that long each year, but we have the most accessible beach in the nation in terms of the ramp that was built there. So we're also looking to always find additional ways to advance equity across the county. Those are just a handful. I could go into more details, but I think your question was more about partnership. And for that, I would turn it back to Director Roman and Leanne around the Diverse and Inclusive Communities team.
I know specifically housing.
Around housing specifically.
Okay. Yeah. So I know that housing is just going to be one of those topic areas that we're going to elevate and put forth some recommendations to the county exec's office and the leadership of the county to really, deep dive into what that is, and how do we identify the barriers that exist in our housing landscapes across the county. And one way to partner in those conversations is through participation in the Dismantling Diverse and Inclusive Work Group. Those will be the forums by which we will, as we engage community and we engage the various stakeholders, we'll be asking some of those questions. We'll be asking some of the questions about, okay, how do we understand this to be a problem? What kind of learning and education do we need to equip ourselves to make the most beneficial decisions, that the most effective decision that will benefit the residents? Those will be the forums by which those happen. What we can also do is make sure that as we are having those conversations, where we need to engage some additional supports and training and consultants, we will continue to do that, as we've been doing at around a number of other areas in the county. And so I would say it starts with joining us in those discussions with the diverse and in the Diverse and Inclusive Communities Work Group that is responsible for identifying, having discourse about, and then setting forth a set of recommendations to the county executive around, housing, particularly as a lever of success and healthy success for residents.
So it sounds like it's very early and nothing concrete yet.
Nothing concrete yet.
Thank you.
Which is, yeah. Because a lot of this has to be customized based on the needs, based on what we hear, based on what we have. And there isn't a checkbox, or we can't just say, let's just take this and put this here. That's not how this works in reality. And so it's, like I said, the process is equally important as the outcome that we want. And it is that process that will allow us to define the specific needs that we need and develop the tools that will need to be developed to be able to fulfill that need. It sounds like,
and I would actually, if I can just jump in, Jeff, I think you're being a little too humble here. There are actually concrete things, I think the fact that there is a group that meets every 2 weeks and is creating, first it's generating the documents, it's generating the plans, and then it's drilling down on what those products are related to the plans. And so I think the process itself, I would say, is pretty concrete, and really another concrete piece that's critical to this stage is this intersection of levels of government, levels of, different stakeholders. So just a few days ago, I met with a new trustee from Whitefish Bay who said, gosh, it seems like you guys are doing so much in Shorewood. How can we get things going? And I kind of demystified, like, yeah, it looks like it, but, here's kind of pulling back the curtain what it actually looks like. And so if you don't have any citizen committees structure set up, there's no place to work on these things, right? There's no place. So, a place to start would be having a citizen committee, and then you have to write an ordinance. So you have to get board approval, those kinds of things. So I think, and going back to lots of points here today around that, it's a long-term process, and it's a long-term, it's a vision that we work towards, consistently. So, I just wanted to say, like, Jeff, I think there's a lot of concrete things here, but I understand how you're very process heavy and committed to that. So.
Yeah, President McKay, I think that's a great point. That's part of what I'm right. When the board passed the extension of the TID, which was a great move. I think everybody in their own mind had a vision of what that looked like. You had obviously the racial equity question. I think you clearly had, people that were focused on the aging in place challenges in Shorewood. You had people with the, people with special needs needing affordable housing. So you have lots of different constituencies that are looking at that and saying, oh, that's the answer for us. And that to me is part of the, getting back to Jeff's, the education, getting us all on the same page as we start from point A through to what does this actually look like in real life. And so I feel like part of that, Isaac, your work, I think on the research that's been done on the historical aspects of this, I think some of that is important for us. If we could, I feel like, using some of that to continue to educate ourselves and our community about, here's the history, here's what it looked like, here's what was done. And then, because then you can start, I feel like that's the level set to people, right? That here's where we all are now at this point based on our history. And so that then means this is what it looks like moving forward, again, at a conceptual strategic level, and we all agree on that. And then when we're good on that, then we get to implementation and actual, now what does it look like in the community? Those are the kind of the three big buckets that I put in my head. And so again, I feel like the county has done a lot of that work around the history. And so if we can, partner in that and be able to share some of that work you've already done with our community, however that gets presented, I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like everybody has in their own mind what this looks like, and we need to, that's I think our challenge, because when we get to the solution too fast, everybody's going to no, that's not what I envisioned as the answer. And so I think we really need to be careful about all walking the same path from where we are now, which is all questions, to ultimately that where we get to the answers. So again, is that information you can share? Are those, maybe it's a broader presentation on that actual information? I know you went through it really quickly, but my guess is there's a lot of really good information in there.
Absolutely.
That would help us.
We'd be more than happy to share any and all resources.
Peter,
Again, I want to open the CDA just on that question and whether, people's thoughts on that. Again, I come out of this meeting right now, my head is just spinning, which I think is good. That's a good place to be at this point, because we're all thinking and trying to figure this out. But again, any other CDA members as we look forward in a path, any other thoughts from you all?
Peter, Joe Lesage has his hand raised.
Oh, yeah, Joe.
Yeah, hi. And I'm appreciative of everyone's efforts here. And I may be flying in the face of what everyone is saying with taking their time, but I did want to just put this out there. I have my real estate hat on. The creation of affordable housing requires either conversion or creation, and Shorewood is hampered greatly by lack of developable land. And I see a big opening for a conversation here, in that our western boundary, I believe, is owned by Milwaukee County. If there's, and historically that's been untouchable, I think. I'm not clear on that all, but I'd like to see if there's a possibility for a conversation there of a cooperation between the county and the village on utilization of some of that land that's there for the creation of affordable housing, specifically along Wilson Drive. And I think there's a triangle on Capitol too, just past the memory care facility. This is sort of to David's point. I've looked at trying to annex pieces of, or overlay onto pieces of the city of Milwaukee, like Singer Court and just west of the river. I think it's all very difficult, but I'd like to be open to that discussion with the county of that land right there, specifically on Wilson, if that's an opportunity to work together. And that's my comment.
Just to be clear, are you talking about along Wilson Drive north of Capitol?
Yes.
By the bike trail?
Yes.
From Hampton all the way down?
I'm talking about any land that the county owns, but that is specifically one area of interest to me. Yeah. Just north of AB Data and all that stuff.
Well, no, that's privately owned, right? That F group?
North of that.
Oh, north of that. I think that discussion has been had during the Wilson Drive, and that was a non-starter with the local community.
If I may, Trustee Stokebrand. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Buckworth.
Okay, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. So I wouldn't exactly say that the political will when flows in many different directions. I know that there was a very organized group of individuals that didn't want anything, but there were non-starters, not necessarily because of internal or even community support or lack thereof. But you're right that it would require a partnership, not just with the village and the county, but also you have the railroads that own the bike path and whatnot. Not trying to say it's impossible. I appreciate that this discussion will continue to come up because there are a lot of people who would love to see that area developed, whether it's for market rate, affordable, mixed use, etc. But also many people who want to preserve it. So it is politically tricky for sure, not just internally within the village, but when you deal with with so many diverse groups and stakeholders outside of your own local jurisdiction. But it's something, it should not be left off the table. Everything should be explored because you're absolutely right, Joe. We're landlocked. We have very little developable land. And I'm so grateful that we're having this collaboration with the county and others. And I look forward to looking at other opportunities, beyond that, and including rehabbing existing homes, existing businesses, looking at zoning uses, looking at different things. We've got a lot ahead of us in a very small village with a very small staff. So having the partnership with the force of the county and even the city of Milwaukee, I was speaking with the budget director and others yesterday regarding some things, but I'll bring that up at another time. So I'll cede my time. Thank you.
Peter, Charlie DeSando has his hand raised.
Yeah, hey, Charlie, go ahead.
Pete, how you doing? I had a comment about the terminology. I have a very good friend who's assistant director at the Milwaukee Housing Authority, Willie Hines, former Common Council president. And I was talking to him about this subject as it relates to Shorewood and the CDA. And his first comment was the term affordable housing is a pejorative, and they don't use the term affordable housing, they just say housing. And I think I could point out within this conversation within the last hour and a half, Jeff specifically, every time the term housing, anytime about housing, he only said housing. There was no adjective related to that. Housing is what it is. Affordable housing has an actual definition. It's 30, if you're, I guess it's 30% or less of your income towards housing. So almost all of us live in affordable housing. So I think there's a reason that some people don't use the term affordable housing because it is a pejorative in many ways. I understand why it's used, but I think there needs to be some thought involved in the term. And by the way, I'm on the Human Relations Commission to introduce myself and appreciate the opportunity to be invited to the meeting. Thank you.
Peter, David Menta has her hand raised.
Well, and I would say just to Charlie's point, I guess it's a great point of yeah, we're going to be talking about things and learning things here, and I think obviously probably be making mistakes and using bad terminology, and I agree that has the potential to not send the message that we want to send. So we need to be cognizant of that, and so I appreciate you bringing it up, and that we can all acknowledge that is a point. And again, our intentions are good, and we're probably going to trip a little bit along this way, but it is a good reminder to keep all perspectives in view here as to how people are receiving this, how people are hearing what we're saying, and we certainly don't want to turn people off or give them a negative impression of what we're trying to do here. So Charlie, I appreciate that comment. I'm sorry, Dave, you said David, I had a question or comment. Anybody else from the county have anything to Charlie's question or point? No? Okay. But sorry, David, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for recognizing me a second time, Pete. I just wanted to say, the TID funded luxury housing that has been built in the 2010s in Shorewood increased our housing stock by 5%. They were all redevelopment projects. I mean, I agree with Joe, there's not a lot of empty land in Shorewood, but I think we have to realize that we were able to increase market and luxury housing by 5%. All through redevelopment. So, and you know, Sunseekers is every development opportunity that comes forward, not just Sunseekers, but we have the bank site at Lake Bluff and Oakland, and we have the big building at Capitol in Oakley. So, you know, there's I think we need to be looking at all kind of a racial equity lens that the county discussed. I think we need to be looking at every single development proposal that comes through as an opportunity for affordable housing, and that we've already proven that we can increase substantially the supply of units through redevelopment, and we don't need to you know, build on parkland and just to point out that that property that Joe was talking about is not county owned, it's right of way, and it's a lot more complicated to you know, undeed that to be able to build on it. So thank you.
Peter, if I may, could I just update on two recent decisions from the village board that occurred on Monday relative to this topic?
Thanks.
So the village board is moving ahead. We're going to be working on an RFP to develop a strategic plan for equity, diversity, and inclusion for the village of Shorewood. So you can look forward to seeing and hearing more discussion on that moving forward. In addition, the board made a decision to make available to all of its employees and committees and elected officials. We have limited availability, but we have around 25 potential spots to send people to the fall session of Unlearning Racism put on by the YWCA. I had an opportunity to take this course a couple of years ago, and it was a game changer for me and has really instilled a great passion in me to help continue to grow and to work on these issues. So I share that for the committee members and staff who are on the call. That opportunity will be coming up shortly for you to consider participation in. Thank you.
Rebecca, can you put me on the list? I would like to take it again.
Wonderful.
I don't think I can take that course. I don't think I can take that course enough times, to be honest with you. I get one other thing, maybe for Isaac and Jeff as well. So, and others on the committee are smarter on this than I am, but we just did a housing study, and one of the things that came out of the housing study was we do have and again, Charlie, not to use the wrong term, but it's the term that was sort of in the report. We do have affordable housing units, but they're not occupied by people, they're occupied by, I guess, market rate people, if you will, right? That the demand in Shorewood is so high that while we have the units, we're not achieving, and again, they're not defined as it's just the rent rate on them would be sort of in that area. But again, the demand in Shorewood, it's just, it ends up being occupied by, not who you would expect. And so, yeah, are there thoughts on that in other areas of the county where, again, there are units available, but just because of demand, it's, it's not getting us where we want to go, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, I see Corey Schneider Perugini with her hand up, and I would again defer to a true expert in this area rather than myself. Corey.
This isn't necessarily a solution to that, but I do know, because we work very closely with families that have rent assistance vouchers, and we're working at trying to place them in communities that have high achieving schools and safe neighborhoods. Shorewood is very desirable. Shorewood's a desirable community for a lot of our families. What we don't have is the housing authority sets a rent cap. So like a 3-bedroom is $1,300. And in Shorewood, I know like there's not a lot of 3 bedrooms at $1,300. And that should include the utilities as well. So one possible solution would be some sort of incentive for landlords who have those rental properties in Shorewood to, if there's a tax incentive or some sort of other incentive that could be applied to those landlords so that they put their rent at the range that those families would be able to access. Other communities do that as well. I think Cook County has a law like that where there's a tax incentive. I know that likely requires some sort of state change in legislation, but perhaps there's another incentive that would work for that. But that would get at, opening up some of those units that are close to being affordable for that population to be made available.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from the committee or the other village participants? Yes, Kathy.
So one thing that sort of confuses me, or I'm trying to understand, because of the focus of the county, let's say, to put services like the buses where it can do the most good in terms of equity. So that's, we're not exactly, we had to fight to keep our bus line on Wilson Drive. And I understand that. I understand why you're looking at everything through an equity lens. So, the bus service is focused in that way. But my question then becomes, if you want to provide affordable housing, one of the things you need to do is have a vibrant bus system, right? So I'm kind of confused how, if we work so hard, to make affordable housing, put more units, convert them or create them, without that transportation piece where people need to get to jobs, it's really, I'm trying to understand how that works from the county point of view. We don't want everyone to have to need a car, right? Because they're so expensive. But if you keep taking our bus system, if you keep whittling away our bus service, how does that work for us?
Yeah, this is Isaac. I would just say, I very much hear that concern, and it's one that's voiced, having recently completed tours of many of the municipalities with the county executive. It's a common, it's a shared concern, and it's one that we have as well. I think one of the answers that I would have to that is because of the challenges that are faced by our transit system, it has unfortunately kind of exacerbated this deficit-based mindset around racial equity. That's the mindset I grew up with. I grew up kind of learning, when Black people win, white people lose. It's an either or. And I think what is so powerful about the journey that Jeff spoke about and about engaging in this work really deeply is thinking about what is to be gained by ensuring that all people have access to all communities. So point taken loud and clear, if the county is going to keep cutting bus routes, it's going to hurt the ability for people to commute to and from jobs from the city and the suburbs. And that said, the more we can collaborate in conversations like this and in collaborations like this to ensure that all people have access to all communities, the more we're going to be able to attract and retain the types of talent and families and communities in order to have the income and the tax values that we need for everyone to thrive. This is part of, anyway, I'll stop there, but let me just say, Kathy, I hear you loud and clear, and I think it's part of an ongoing conversation that we should have as part of the diverse and inclusive communities strategy team as to how to ensure that transportation is part of this conversation as well, because we certainly don't want everyone to need a car within Milwaukee County.
And again, an invitation to be a part of that work group. We have the director of the Department of Transportation who will bring this issue up as well, who has brought this issue up in the disparity in access to transportation throughout the whole county. She's a part of the strategy team. Our director of housing is a part of the strategy team. Erin is a part of the strategy team. We have the leaders of the county of departments who are forced of making these decisions, who are part of that strategy team, who are looking for meaningful ways to engage and have these conversations so that all these considerations can be a part of the collective decisions that we need to make. And so I would encourage and invite you all, if you have the time and the ability to meet with us, and it doesn't have to be every other week when we meet, but if you can meet, at your convenience, if you can meet and bring those issues to light in those conversations when we have those decision makers in the table, so that we can have constructive conversation and talk about the benefits and the burdens of these issues, that will get us to hopefully some type of compromise or some kind of resolution, so that communities don't feel like we're pitting communities against each other because of lack of or over distribution of resources in one community over the other. The conversations are important to have. Those are considerations that are important to make the decisions that need to be made. So welcome to the group. We hope that you join us.
And I would say that I've done consulting work with the county for several years in different capacities, and I would say there's no lack of political will at the county level for a robust transit system. There is lack of political will at the state level, unfortunately. And and I'm not saying that to say like, it's the state's problem, but it's just a reality of a way of talking, kind of like relocating the problem so that we aren't that we are focused on collaboration with what we have, but also knowing that we always have to be working statewide to get resources, because people need transportation. Transportation is an issue across the state, and we need leadership around that. So it's not an either or, to your point. It's an and all at the same time.
And I feel like that Jeff, your point is so well taken. I feel like that's an example where, again, we are all on this journey together. I so appreciate you all coming on and sharing where you are in the process and not having all the answers, and admitting that, we're on this path. And that is sort of, to me, different than maybe how government sort of, citizens expect government to have the answers and to get the answer. And that's not the way this process is going to work. We're going to have the community involved in helping us come up with the answers, which to me is, and that puts, as the chair of the CDA, that puts me in a very vulnerable, right? Because I know people are asking me, what is the answer? How is this going to work? What does this look like? And, it's getting people to understand they need to be part of the project. So to help us work on it, this needs to be the most inclusive thing that we as a community in Shorewood have ever done, to make sure that we are, in agreement. We're going to have disagreements, and we're people aren't going to agree with the way things ultimately look, but they are going to have been a part of the process. Their voice is going to be heard, because I think that's the only way we get to where we're trying to go. But it's a daunting task, if you ask me, as I think about the path. Where I'm so excited about the path, but it is, I am a person who likes to see the path, and I don't see the path right now, and I know it's coming together. And this conversation has been exceptionally helpful to work down that, and just the resources that you have and the work you've done and the groups you have. I think we need to look at those groups again and understand them, and maybe we can have folks from Shorewood make sure we're represented on some of those, to hear what's going on and to bring it back to share with the community. I think those are kind of the things that we're looking at. That's one of the takeaways I think I take from this meeting right away, is I think, again, the research work you've done on historical, and also the committees you have, and our maybe participation in some of those.
Yeah, and can I just encourage you all, and I'm the encourager, and you mentioned the word, Peter, vulnerability. Embrace the vulnerability. be transparent.
Yep.
Transparency, vulnerability, accountability, those are key words. But what it signifies is that one, we don't have all the answers. And sometimes we make the expectation that others expect us to have all the answers. And that's okay if we don't, if we're being transparent about, we're in this journey together. The other thing is vulnerability. It reminds us that we're giving up control and we're giving up power. And at the root of racial equity work, at the root of equity work, it is the giving up of power to those who have power and giving to those who don't, to make the decisions for themselves, and to work in partnership to develop what the interventions and the solutions together as a collective. And so embrace the vulnerability, embrace the challenge of not being in control and having the power. And this is a hard conversation for government because we want to be in control, and we want to maintain power. But at the root of what we're talking about is the redistribution of power and resources to the people who have not had it. And that's the concept, that's the grounding that we have to do this work from. And it flips everything that we've been taught about how to run government, about how to do housing, about how to do these things. It's about sharing power and decision-making with those who haven't had it. And it requires vulnerability, it requires transparency, and it requires us to do the work that we need to do, sometimes get out of our own ways, to be able to engage those communities who have been impacted, regardless of what color they are or where they're from.
Jeff, that's another great point. And just that sort of, to me, gets back to one of my first questions, which was that, so again, Shorewood is looking to make good on its desire to be a more diverse and inclusive, to continue to be as diverse and inclusive as we possibly can be. But to do that, we need the voices, we need other voices in our conversation. Right. And I guess that's where and again, your voices are very helpful. This is very helpful, but you're exactly right. Where do we go to hear those? A lot of those voices aren't in Shorewood, right? The whole point is those voices are outside of Shorewood, to help Shorewood come to a good answer to our opportunity. And so how do we make sure we're hearing those voices?
Yeah.
And because I agree, they're the ones that are going to help define the solution that actually works.
Yeah, I think one place to start, and so I was appointed, and there's a housing advisory. Aaron, help me with this. There's a housing advisory council for the county that has citizen representation in various parts of the county that formed that work group, that formed that advisory council. And they've been having very similar conversations about how to better engage and have conversations with those who are accessing housing services from the county. That might be one way to at least start to have some conversation, to be able to have some touch points in various communities, including the city of Milwaukee, so that we can get some of that input and perspectives. But all that to say, there are resources and things that we can leverage in our communities, in our governments, in the county, that are happening, different boards, different committees, different things. The better we understand and can identify and understand what those assets are, the better touch points we can have to be able to get the information that you're talking about. And I'd be willing to kind of think through how we can tap those resources that we have that have reached into those communities that you want to hear from, to be able to elevate those voices.
Also, to echo what President McKeag shared earlier, I think the hearing from the CDA and folks like Tigwe Lee Smith and Gina Stelp will also help, because they're actively working on these issues as well, with from what I understand, a pretty strong vein of public participation and community engagement as well.
And we also do have residents in Shorewood with a lot of different perspectives and views, from being directly impacted, and also from professional experiences. So I think in the next few months, I know that we're really working hard to create those spaces where people can come together and share that as well. Because I think, I just keep thinking, like 4 months down the road, all of us on this call are going to have a very different view of what Shorewood is and who's really, we're going to find more connections than we are aware of now. And I'm excited about
That's
that.
good point. Yep. Thank you, President McKay. That's a really good
And
point. Yep.
yeah, and I guess I'll also just say that the working with the county around the strategy teams is, and the going to the ICC meetings and just seeing all these connections around there's change happening in every single municipality. And it brings us more around surfacing these discussions around like transportation deficits and housing deficits and, you know, fears of win-lose, and, you know, really surfacing those is going to bring us more, we're going to have more in common with more people rather than the kind of continued silo thinking that we've brought up to, you know, to be. We have a very siloed system, and it's these types of experiences and this process that you all are creating that de-silos and allows us to move forward despite some of the barriers that are there structurally. So just hang in there. We're going to get there.
That's right.
It's okay, Peter. We'll have lunch. That's good.
No, it is all good. All right. This is the work that has to happen in order for things to,
exactly,
go the right direction.
I just wanted to offer to anyone, you know, we've had a number of people drop off the call, which I expect it's a Friday morning and 10:15, which has been a lot of time and commitment from members of the public and from the group who's chosen to join us this morning. We're going to be recording this session and also sharing it on the website. So please feel free to share with others, because you don't have to necessarily attend and listen to the conversation at the time the meeting's held. You can do so at any time or at the time when you choose to plug in to the conversation. If you'd like to receive direct emails from me on different things that we're going to be doing and also reminders of these meetings, please feel free to reach out to me and I can include your name on that list. And I just wanted to give a friendly reminder that our next meeting for the CDA will be on Tuesday, August 10th at 9 a.m. That will occur via Zoom. And again, there we will have presenters from the Community Development Alliance sharing their journey and what their next steps are. And a lot of the content that we've talked about this morning, what they're going to share will be a really great next building block for our journey and for our education. Anything else for
Thank you, Rebecca.
the call today?
All right.
I just want to say, if anybody on the call has any questions around anything that I've shared or any of these teams or this kind of like bigger picture around countywide stuff, I'm happy to meet, or, you know, for coffee or anything else. Beer is great too. And if 20 people reach out to me, we will meet all together. So not one by one, but I just want to make myself available because I am doing this work in a lot of different spaces. And if anything that I have access to would help people feel more grounded in the work, I definitely want to make sure that happens.
I would echo that. The
Great.
same goes for me. I'll share the slides that we shared today, as well as our contact information. And we are here to serve you. So please do not hesitate to contact us if we can be helpful in any way. Very much appreciate you allowing us to join you today.
Thank you all for your work. You all are on the path that you all are supposed to be on and doing great work. Continue to do it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Isaac. Really appreciate it.
Yes,
So
thank
then-
you all.
You guys can all leave, but first you have to give me a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
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 Excellent. Thank you again. Great conversation.
Have a
Thanks,
good
guys.
weekend.
Have a great weekend.
All righty.
You too.